Hello everyone. Today, we will be continuing our series on Nox. The subject of this video is ASP-15. This analysis has a clearance level of 1. As with the previous video, watching part 1 and 2 of this series will give the context to understanding this video. ASP-15 is what is known as the pull-off. Actually, pull-off is more of a rough translation from a Croatian name for it. We'll get into why the name is fitting later. Nox was less involved with this creature than his team members, so the information presented here is certainly incomplete. This is what we have so far. This creature has distinct similarities to ASP-8, the Crawler, the most obvious of which being the pale skin, its reported photophore and chromatophore structure, the creature's somewhat gaunt build, and its interdimensional origins. The pull-off has hoofed feet and hands, and the creature's joint structure would be indicative that ASP-15 keeps its body in a large X formation when crawling, although as of right now this is just conjecture. Its skin coloring is similar to that of the Monotropa uniflora plant. This plant is sometimes called ghost pipes and is a waxy white. These creatures are typically 9 feet tall. Its teeth are molar-like for being a supposed predator, although humans have a similar structure and are apex predators, so similar reasoning may be used. Humans developed more molar-like teeth as humans relied on tool use, and the pull-off would be using its hooves to incapacitate its next meal. The teeth may have also been affected by sublimation, as in Nox's best look at one, there was a lot of sublimation present. The creature also seemed to have exposed sinuses, as if the sinus cavity had never been sealed. This may not be entirely accurate due to the same reason of sublimation. However, due to the symmetry found in this specimen, it can be deduced that this is a natural aspect of this creature and not a result of the recent damage, as the chances of the injury forming into the result of symmetrical wounds would be far less likely. This could be used for many different abilities. Some speculative uses include scent detection and echolocation as seen in bats. Although sounds have not generally been heard coming from these creatures, aside from environmental ones, that does not discount the possibility of echolocation. It just reduces the chances by a fair margin. These creatures also seem to give off a smell akin to that of a yeasty ammonia scent. This indicates some of the alkaline compounds this creature may be made of or contain, although we know it is at least not dangerous or a contagion by the lack of hazmat suits and gas masks when Nox saw others handle it. Before getting into its abilities, this is a drawing of the creature lying on the ground. This drawing is less accurate than an intact specimen, as the subject was damaged quite heavily because this particular pull-off was having a bad day, with roughly half the tissue missing. Another team had come in to secure it and used a 51mm shoulder-fired recoil rifle with canister rounds to weaken it. For those who don't know, canister rounds are basically shotgun shells, and are rounds that burst open with a spray of bullets. Nox has also shown me the newer 76mm version of this rifle, which, for context, a 76mm Mark 75 non-shoulder mounted version of this gun is what is used on the front of a Coast Guard cutter, the type of thing that can obliterate a regular fishing ship and all on it. Not sink it, mind you, but leave only floating debris. Here's some footage of the 76mm in case anyone had any doubts about the specifications we listed currently existing, or just want to see an example. This sort of thing can destroy a city block. You don't really need to aim it at your target, more just point it in the general direction and take it out with the rest of the forest. The 76mm was in the prototyping phase around 15 years ago. The 51mm was established in 1982. With this, you'll get an idea of how resilient these creatures are. So when not missing large amounts of tissue, the extended pelvis-like bone is most likely used to support a large amount of substances when ingested in its gut area, as well as supporting various viscera. And the creature most likely had eyes in its 2 sockets, but the details were not easy to make out on the subject. These creatures can create asexual buds to gestate and deliver from their backs. This next piece of anatomy is possibly just speculation, but if you look at the image, this instance of ASP-15 in its current state seems to indicate it has a coccyx formed from a vestigial tail. This may be from remnant evolution, attachment to a tail that was affected by sublimation, early evolution, a biological design that isn't currently understood, or some other reason. The visible deductions may also be influenced by pareidolia. While we are on the topic of pictures, here are photos of its track as it slipped in deceivingly wet mud. There's a foot and a hand for comparison, but all human limbs are different sizes, so to make this easier, the track is roughly 2.5 feet long. Don't worry, these human limbs were attached to an alive person, in case that wasn't clear. In fact, this length and surface area would typically act as a sort of snowshoe, rarely leaving tracks. And here's a picture of moss on a rock affected by the portal it came through. These photos were taken on an expedition undertaken by the ASP Foundation personnel being guided by Nox to find pathways pull-offs will consistently travel. These areas were then investigated by the expedition team. This expedition was led by Missy, who found the tracks and took the photos, and was conducted in Colorado. There are also photos from this expedition of what we refer to as the Portal Rock, although due to time constraints we will have to visit this piece of the expedition at a later date. The pull-off can on occasion occasion hide in trees, bushes, or other hiding spots and grab unsuspecting victims within an instant, hence the name. Due to its electrocyte bundles, it has the ability to electrocute and thus incapacitate its quarry. It is known to target the nape of the neck on humans with its electric shock. Protective rubberized canvas coverings have been used on the nape of the neck to prevent this. At least this is what Nox observed in Armenia and Croatia. If you remember the OTN list describing electrocyte bundles and the tin 2 chloride being effective against creatures with them from the previous video, this is where some of that comes into play, as this is one of the creatures with the electrocyte bundles. This creature also makes use of the aforementioned van der Waal forces mentioned in the first video in this series. It uses a phospholipid bilayer on the palm of the hooves. It's assumed that it packs various fatty acid tails inside this bilayer, creating the hydrogen bonding and electrostatic attractions that make these van der Waal forces attractions occur. This attraction happens in the middle of the hydrophilic groups of phospholipids and the other aqueous solution is trying to stick to. You can even test for remnant phospholipids in places it has stepped or touched, which is a good confirmation method Nox has used to check if a pull-off touched or stepped somewhere. The hydrophobic bond it creates is the weakest of chemical bonds, which makes it easier to attach and detach from the aqueous solution its pads are bonding with. This is a very similar method to what geckos use in their setae. One interesting aspect of this creature is that it seemingly has a quasi-sinophoniphoric structure in parts of its body, giving it more resilient capabilities, which, if true, relates to the previous show of resilience against kinetic weaponry. And the idea would be supported by its asexual reproduction since, at least on Earth, siphonophores bud to reproduce as well. A siphonophore is an organism made up of many organisms called zooids, which can be cut off from the host without the host dying, such as a sponge or Portuguese manowar. If parts of the pull-off structure are quasi-siphonophoric, this would also be advantageous to an expanded diet, utilized to overcome conversion sickness. Conversion sickness is the decay mentioned in our portal video, from the creature's body being in a place with physics it is not adapted to. This ASP is seemingly more circumboreal, with most of its appearances, known to the Foundation, being recorded in the northern hemisphere. This may be due to adaptations allowing longevity in colder climates, or perhaps there's some work with the portals or animal behavior that causes them to emerge more frequently in these areas. It could also just be chance or statistical bias. As with most things like this, it is far more unknown than known. In terms of credibility, we can go off what we have so far. If the portals are true, there will be many odd creatures. Nox saw it pretty closely and was given information by people who already know what they were talking about. The creature itself is using some abilities we have already seen in creatures on Earth, such as the electric eel, a sponge, a crawler, or a gecko. Nox's sightings may seem quite unique, which is not good for credibility. However, many of the larger crawler sightings may be misidentified pull-offs, just as the crawler itself has been misidentified under a slew of other names. With this creature being more dangerous and evasive than the crawler, the finer details may not be so visible during these sightings, and the creature may be avoided altogether. Even with some details present, the education required to categorize those details as important to the report is simply not there for the average witness. Nox himself also states that it is a smart move to avoid contact when possible, and even the majority of his sightings have been from 30 to 100 yards away, lasting less than 5 seconds. For the most part, this does not differ from Earth's creatures in ability, and is only a little stranger. There's no real reason for Nox to make this up, and although seemingly rare, there are corroborating witnesses and possibly misidentified reports. Remember, scientists have confirmed this thing is real and have studied bodies of them, they just haven't released it to the public yet. All in all, it seems plausible with what we know so far, and has no real evidence against it, except the typical hardened skepticism, which is fair, but not enough compared to the delusional conspiracy theory you'd have to come up with to ignore all the evidence we have presented thus far in these 3 videos. This is a shorter video because it is just an introduction. There's no real need to look at much more individual credibility, as it mostly fits nicely into the credibility we have already discussed. That's it. Leave a comment with your thoughts and like the video if you enjoyed. Goodbye.